is not meeting this morning because he's in Louisiana and they have a lot of flooding and they had tornado warnings and all kinds of stuff going on. So remember those folks in Louisiana this week as they are dealing with the rain and the storm that has rolled in on them. A lot of that going on. So we are now live on Facebook. If you are joining us today, it's good to have you with us. You might be watching us now. We've figured out that we have a YouTube channel, so you might be watching us on YouTube. I don't get watched on YouTube very much. I go and I can look at the amount of views, and there's like none. So that's okay. But that's okay. It's not an exercise in vanity. I'm not out there so you can watch me. I'm out there so that when you miss, you have opportunity to go back and watch. So some of you have been missing. I prefer the live version, yeah. It's much better if you can get us live, but we are here, and if there's anything that we can do for you this week, again, if you're on Facebook Live, if there's anything we can do, please just either send me a private message or put it in the message comments there, and we'll pray for you. Anything we can do there. We have been reading along in our reading plan, our Bible reading plan that we started a couple months ago. As you know, this is a kind of a temporary plan. We've mentioned this before, that we are going to start it fresh August 1. My ministry assistant has been working on that. She has taken this particular plan and she is retyping it to start August 1 through July 31. So I encourage you that last week leading into August, I've noticed that the reading plan will move you to begin a brand new reading in Esther. So it's up to you how you want to do that. Either you can take a couple days off, or you can read somewhere, just read Proverbs, or you can do something to keep reading so you don't lose the momentum. Thank you. But I struggle with the idea of starting a book and not finishing it. Yeah. That's my type A. It's like if I'm going to start Esther, I'm going to finish Esther. So, but it's going to start back on Genesis 1:1 when we go back to August 1, and that's where our year will begin. Okay, that will be available to you when you get back then to Kings and Chronicles. You'll be able to read that again, and because it may bring more things to light for you. And Peg posted that while you're in Chronicles right now, that there is a great teaching series on that called Game of Thrones from Pine Lake. That's Chip Henderson. We like to listen to him as one of our go-to outside of GFBC people to listen to. So if you want to go listen to Chip do his Game of Thrones, there's like six or seven, and they're really good. So you don't want to miss those. You've done one already, yeah. And it's good stuff in it. So you'll learn more about these kings as you do that. So anyway, it's been good. But our reading this week, we've been reading in some Proverbs, and a great, if nothing else, a great Bible reading plan is to read whatever proverb is that day of the month. So today would be the 14th, so you read Proverbs 14 for today. It has been said, if you can get a grasp on the Proverbs, if you can live those out in your life, then you are really doing a fantastic job. Okay. In fact, I would go so far if there was 3 areas of practical Christian living to study and try to live and learn from, it would be the Proverbs, the Sermon on the Mount, and the Book of James. Yes, sir.
I've heard it said many times, if you want to be wise, you read the book of Proverbs.
That's right.
And you read the book of Psalms if you want to be sweet.
There you go. Read Psalms to be sweet. So that's a nice little metaphor to use there. We are actually going to be, glad you said that, we're going to be in both places today. We're going to be in Proverbs and Psalms. But I printed out something today. A proverb is a short, pithy, generalized statement. It's stating a general truth. It's important to remember when you read the book of Proverbs, these are not God promises. Why do I say that? Because God promises are yes and amen. His promises always are fulfilled. These are generalized statements that generally, if you follow them, they come true, right? But we all know there are certain proverbs that you can live out, that you've seen people live out, that has not come to fruition. For example, Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. We know there are folks who have raised their children in church, they've raised their children in the way they should go, but they did depart from it, right? So in general, the majority of the time, these things happen. If you want to set yourself up for success, follow these proverbs. The wisdom literature is often difficult. Wisdom literature being the book of Proverbs, you had Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, that whole wisdom literature section is sometimes tough. Proverbs is tough because sometimes it feels like it's just random statements put together. And you're going, how in the world do these things go together? But if you take the time to really look at them closely, there is generally a theme for a chapter. And you're able to see how they work together. But as we've read in Proverbs today, a phrase jumped out at me while I was studying, and that sent me to do some investigating and to find out what was going on, which has led us to this particular series called The Fear of the Lord. Okay? It's going to be a 5-weeker. We're going to do an introduction today, and then we'll have 4 weeks of what the fear of the Lord is. There are 4 times out of the 14 times that the fear of the Lord is used in the book of Proverbs, 4 of those times it says the fear of the Lord is, and it defines it for us. And we're going to look at those things. We're going to see what the fear of the Lord is as we go through in our lives. But we're going to get started today, and we're going to look at the introduction in chapter 1 in the first 7 verses. Go ahead and flip to Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7. Are there proverbs that you can think of that have been, someone has said to you? I'm not saying necessarily the Proverbs, these 31 chapters in the book in the Old Testament. Are there other proverbs you've heard that you've heard people follow? I came across a Gaither Vocal Band song this morning as I was putting some final thoughts together, and I thought these are kind of modern day proverbs. The chorus of the song says, "If you want more happy than your heart will hold, if you want to stand taller if the truth were told, take whatever you have and give it away." I mean, that's a proverb. He's basically saying to get to a point where you're overflowing with happy. If you're overflowing with feeling confident in yourself, one of the best ways to get there is to give it away. That's a general statement. It's not always a promise. He goes on, he says, if you want less lonely, a lot of us would be there. If you want less lonely and a lot more fun, it's funny the way they put words in there because they got to rhyme, right? If you want less lonely and a lot more fun and deep satisfaction when the day is done, then throw your heart wide open and give it away. Proverbs. Short, generalized statements for how to live your life. The book of Proverbs the majority of it has been written by Solomon. We just read about Solomon in both Kings and Chronicles. We talked about him and the fact that he asked for wisdom to lead the people. And in this first 7 verses, Solomon is going to tell us the goal of this book, the audience of this book, and the motto of this book. As we read through this, look for the audience. You'll see it's the simple, the young, the wise, and fools. And he's going to show us very quickly the purpose for why he's written this. So let's just read the first 7 verses here. It says, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, in justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. Verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. He's told us his goal of this book is to instill wisdom in the reader. Knowing that the book is found in the canon of the Old Testament, you can really say that it's meant to instill wisdom in the people of God. Wisdom that works itself out and shows up in a godly life and practical details of everyday life. If you wanted to look in the New Testament for a similar type of writing, something that would help you to learn to live a practical, everyday Christian life, I would suggest you read, study, and try to become, for lack of a better word, an expert in the book of James. It's very practical. You want to learn from these things because we all have places in our life where we have blind spots. There's no one who has arrived to the point that they don't need to continue to be learning. In fact, as I read these things, there were some words that jumped out at me because it's written in stanza form. As you glance down through there, the very first couple words, to know, to understand, to receive, to give. I decided I wanted to do a word study. I wanted to look these things up to make sure that I really understood what these were. So I opened up a powerful word Bible study tool that I borrow from a friend every once in a while, and I did a word study to know and to understand and to give, and I wanted to make sure I really understood what they were saying, and believe it or not, it really meant what I thought it meant. So it was good. I thought, well, how can I rewrite these things? And basically, I took an hour in my office that day doing this word study and then rewriting it in a way that would be more modern. So I wrote down, I'm giving you these proverbs so you will understand how things are to be done. Know what I know. Be willing to accept instruction on how things should be done. Be teachable. Have common sense for those who are simple-minded. Have common sense in everyday affairs. And for the young people, I want you to be able to think through your decisions and be able to apply them in what you have learned and what you know. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we had some other Bible translation that was more modern, that would put it in a way where we wouldn't have to do these long hour word studies. And I was reminded we have those, duh. So I wrote out, or I printed out the New Living Translation version of this. These verses in the New Living Translation read that their purpose is to teach people wisdom and discipline, to help them understand the insights of the wise. Their purpose is to teach people to live disciplined and successful lives, to teach them to do what is right, just, and fair. These proverbs will give insight to the simple, knowledge and discernment to the young. Let the wise listen to these proverbs and become even wiser. Let those with understanding receive guidance by exploring the meaning in these proverbs and parables, the words of the wise and their riddles. Fear of the Lord is the foundation of true knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. Do you want to learn wisdom and discipline for your own life? Do you want to be able to understand the wisdom that comes from others? Then read and live out the Proverbs. You want to live a disciplined life? I mean, who doesn't? Who wouldn't want to be more disciplined? In a life that is demonstrated by doing what is right, just, and fair? Do you want people, when they speak of you, to speak of you as a person who treats people fairly and treats people right? Then read and live out the Proverbs. Do you need insight and discernment? Read and learn from the Proverbs. Even if you would consider yourself already wise, there is room to be wiser still. No one has arrived. Even those who are older in life, those who have been given life experiences, even those who God has blessed with a sense of wisdom, I would say they need to also continue to read and learn the Proverbs. If you look at verse 5, the wise are wise because they are willing to be teachable. There's a sense of arrogance to think that you have nothing else to learn. Those who are considered wise because they know they haven't arrived. They know there are always things to learn. I think back to one of my seminars in particular, that we all have people that we highly respect, the people that we would seek advice from, those who we think would give us godly counsel and just have a way. I have a certain professor from the seminary his name is Dr. Yount, and he has the ability of taking everyday life and see the things that he's teaching us in that. I'm not very good at looking at headlines and reading articles and pulling out, well, that's a very postmodern thought. That is such straight from the philosophy of realism, right? I'm not very good at that. I know what those things are, and if it's very blatant, I can see it, but he has a way of taking the way things are being done, and he's just wise. He's just really good. God has blessed him to be able to incorporate the things he teaches into everyday life as he talks to his students. I remember one time that I was given a presentation on something, And I couldn't tell you what the subject was, couldn't tell you what we were studying at the time. I know it was coming from history, philosophy, and theology, that particular seminar. And, well, I can't say that for sure. It might have been from Ed Psych. I really don't know. But somewhere in there I was given a presentation. And I remember at the end of my presentation, this wise, who I didn't think needed any learning of any kind anymore. I mean, after all, he holds 2 PhDs, right? So he's so far beyond me. And he said, "You taught me something." Now, that's not to say, wow, you must be good because you taught him something. No. This is more looking at him and his wisdom and his intelligence and where he is in his experience of life. He's still willing to learn. Not only learn, but to learn from anyone, including one of his own students. We are considered wise when we remember that the wisdom comes from the fact that we are still learning. We obtain guidance. We seek for advice. We look for those things. How many of you would say you pray for things and you're praying for God to show you direction, and he puts people in your path who will speak life into you, and you will ask them their advice, and they will give you godly advice about what you're doing. The question is, are you willing to accept the advice, or have you already made your mind up and decided this is what you're going to do, and their advice really doesn't matter? And if that's you, by the way, verse 7 calls you a fool, because you have said you would despise the wisdom and the instruction. As you read the Proverbs, don't only see fools there as people who don't follow Jesus. They don't only see fools as people who are not the people of God. Sometimes we are very foolish because people will speak into our lives. They will give us advice. And because we have already determined what should be as far as we're concerned, we want God's will to bend to our will. And therefore we are saying your advice doesn't match what I'm wanting to do anyway, so I'm just going to disregard it. Have you ever had a time that the people that you trust the most, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people, have spoken into your life and they've said, don't do what you're planning on doing, and you did it anyway, and then you had to reap the consequences? We've all been there. We've all been there. There have been many times where I've heard of folks looking to make a decision, and I've asked them, well, what are the people who are the closest to you saying? And of course, you have to consider the source, right? If this isn't a person who's following after God, then really weigh what they have to say. Everything we hear, everything we take in should be filtered through the Word of God. Okay? But listen, God used the donkey. So he can use even the people in your life who aren't following him. So we need to consider the source, but be willing to weigh it, right, against the Word of God. So we all have those times where we ask people, anybody willing to admit, I've been there, I've done that, yeah. Okay, I've listened to it. They didn't say what I wanted them to say, so I went ahead and did it my way anyway. We're going to look at something here in just a minute that goes along with that. What happens when you don't follow, when God extends his hand to you and you spurn his moving and you go on and you do it your way anyway? It doesn't end well, just so you know. But you probably knew that. But we need to look at the fear of the Lord. That's the phrase that got my attention. It's a motto all the way through Proverbs. It's a motto where he says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and destruction. I wanted to make sure I understood clearly what fear meant there. So I did another word study, and here fear is a reverence. It's a feeling of profound respect, specifically for a deity in this case. It's conceived of, though, as fear. It's not the fear where we experience an emotion that is an anticipation of some type of pain or danger. That's not the fear we're talking about. It's not a fear that is brought into the psychological world of where you either fight or flight. It's not that kind of fear. It's a reverence. It's a proper respect and understanding for who God is. We're going to learn as we do this study that the very foundation of all of our knowledge and wisdom, this is a preview for next week, but the foundation of our knowledge and wisdom is the fear of the Lord. If we do not properly understand him, if we do not properly respect him, if we do not properly get from him who he is, then any knowledge that we have for him is incorrect. What we have is a God that we have devised in our own minds rather than the God of the Bible. So I wanted to make sure we understood what fear of the Lord really meant. It's not a fear of pain or a fear of some sort of danger. It is an absolute respect. The fear of the Lord is a core statement in Proverbs. It's a quest for wisdom that begins with a correct understanding of him. But when we correctly understand him as we look through the Proverbs, we will then correctly understand ourselves. And we will understand our position, our place in the order of things. We will correctly understand that he is creator, we are the creation. We will correctly understand we are created in his image. And because of that, if we want to follow him, there are certain things we're going to do. So flip over to Psalm chapter 34. We have to make a transition now from the Son to the Father. Proverbs is written by Solomon, but it just so happens Solomon being a man after his father's heart, he's very wise, but so was David. Psalm 34. So we're going to look there for just a minute. We're going to start in verse 8. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Taste and see. That's personal experience. You can't live off someone else's experience. You have to experience it yourself. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. He says, oh, fear the Lord, you his saints, that's y'all, for those who fear him have no lack. The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, O children, listen to me. Listen to me, and I will teach you the fear of the Lord. What man is there who desires life and loves many days that he may see good? In other words, who is there? Who wouldn't want God's blessing in their life? Who wouldn't want to have the success of God giving them length of days? Who wouldn't want to have a life where God is giving you the blessings that he has promised to his children who follow after him? I want that. I want to be someone who does that. But keep in mind, we're not teaching a prosperity gospel here. We're not teaching that by doing things God ways, you're going to have a full bank account and you're going to have everything going just perfectly good for you. We're not going to say that you're never going to get sick. We're not going to say you're not going to struggle. What we're saying is he is still going to give you the good things. Remember a few weeks ago we talked about one of the greatest blessings to have that you receive from following God. It isn't monetary. It isn't anything that you can go pick up off a shelf. It is absolutely peace in your heart. It's knowing that no matter what's coming, no matter what's going on in your life, you're feeling peace in your life. He says, I'm going to teach you that. You want to know how to have that kind of life? I'm going to teach you to have the fear of the Lord. And here's what it looks like. Verse 13, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Ouch. Right off the bat. David's telling us right from the start, you want to live a life where you properly understand who God is and live your life accordingly? Well, if you live your life accordingly to who he really is, then you're going to watch your tongue. I struggle with that. He says, turn away from evil and do good, seek peace and pursue it. But he says, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Now, if I asked you, keep your lips from speaking deceit, what is the most literal interpretation of that?
Don't tell a lie.
Don't tell a lie. But he's saying keep your lips from deceit. Maybe there's more to that than just simply don't tell a lie. What if it's speaking to people in a way that does not properly reflect who they are? Are you speaking lies into their life? Cruelty would be one way to describe that. Yeah, you could be cruel. You could be disparaging in some other way. What we have to remember, no matter who we're speaking to, no matter whether they're friend, family, stranger, acquaintance, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter any demographics about them. The person we are speaking to is created in the image of God. And if we're not speaking to them in a way that reflects the fact that they are created in the image of God, then we are speaking deceit from our lips. Now, I know that's meddling. Now, I hope you wore your steel-toed boots this morning, because I'm going to be jumping up and down on your toes and mine a little bit. God jumped all over mine while in the office this week, so it's only fair that your toes are sore by the time we're done, right? No. But listen, don't speak evil, don't speak with deceit. James, we've mentioned James already today. That's another practical place to go look when you're looking for practical ways to live the Christian life. James tells us in chapter 3, verse 4, look at the ships also, though they are so large and driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. And you're familiar with this section of James. He's going to talk about the fact the tongue is a fire, that it takes a very small fire to start a forest fire. Peg and I talked this week a little bit about the old 1960s and 70s praise song, Pass It On. It only takes a spark to get a fire going. I mentioned that in the other class. They had no idea what I was talking about. You would have had to pretty much been raised in church from an early age to, we sang, instead of Kumbaya, we sang Pass It On around the campfire, Anybody want to sing with me? No, I'm just kidding. So it only takes a little, the tongue is a fire. Why is it that he basically goes on and he says that every type of animal has been tamed, whether it's a wild beast or it's a domesticated thing, whether it's a bird of the air or a fish, every type of wild animal has been tamed, but no one can tame the human tongue. How many of you admit that your tongue, your lips, your mouth gets you in trouble? Come on. Thank you. All right. Because basically I'm looking around. If I don't see a hand up, it ought to be. Because we all get in trouble when it comes to our tongues. We all get in trouble when it comes to those things. But we don't, listen, we don't want to think about things beyond speaking disparagingly to people. That's the kind of thing we often will, if I can just stop speaking negatively to people, I'm doing better. Well, you are doing better, but that's not all James is talking about. That's not all the psalmist is talking about. The headings in our Bible sometimes throw us off, right? Because you think when you get to a new heading that it's a completely different thought than what the writer was saying before you got to that heading. And I have a heading right before verse 13. But in truth, because if you go back and you read verse 5, he said, so also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. When you get to verse 13, he continues the thought as he says, who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. What is the reason for the being negative and disparaging and cutting down on people? Build yourself up, make you feel better. There is jealousy and there is ambition in your heart. You're not going to let them get the last word. It's a pride thing. You ever been around somebody that just could not let you have the last word? Yep. And what? How do you know they wouldn't let you have the last word? Because you tried to get it, didn't you? You tried to get the last word, and then they wanted to get the last word. How many people do you know you've been around them and they just under their breath, but not really under their breath. It's really loud enough for everybody to hear it. They have some comment when it's over about what you were just fussing about, because they're going to get the last word in. What's the purpose of that last comment?
They think they've won the battle.
They think they've won the battle. Is it, if you get down to the nitty-gritty, is the purpose of that last comment, because it's usually cutting toward the person that it's being said toward?
It's to let you know who's boss.
It's to let you know who's boss.
Teach you a lesson.
Teach you a lesson. to make a point, but it's honestly, if you boil it right down, it's to be hurtful to that other person. Jesus tells us not to be like that. James is saying, don't use your words, don't use your tongue to carry out the jealousy and the selfish ambition in your heart. Do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but it is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Ow.
I did it to a nurse the other night.
You did that to a nurse the other night?
Yeah. For 3 hours, no one come in there. I knew she was going downhill. I got out there and had them bring me equipment, and I was doing stuff myself.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Just-
been there, had a little talk.
Yeah. Had to get that cleared up.
And then after she passed away, I got him in the corner and apologized to help him make me feel even worse. I hope.
Okay.
Makes somebody feel worse.
Not sure that that's the point of apology, is to make people feel worse. If it is, we might have to talk about motives of the heart, but that's a whole other lesson. But if we go back to verse 16, thank you. If we go back to verse 16, for where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make it. Okay? That's what James is saying. Go back to Psalm 34. We just finished there with keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. But verse 14 says, turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. That it's not enough to simply say that you want there to be peace. It's not enough for you to say, let there be peace on earth, right? And it's not going, yeah, whatever. And it's not, and it's not going to, the song finishes with, and let it begin with me. Okay? You have to pursue it. Paul tells us in Romans 12, as far as it depends on you, keep the peace. I've gone back to that chapter over and over looking for exceptions to the rule. And I haven't found any.
Well, if you find one, let me know.
Yeah, he just leaves it at, as far as it depends on you, keep the peace. You cannot control other people. Peg and I have talked about this a lot lately. We've mentioned it once or twice in this class. The idea of choosing to not be offended. That's difficult.
It's very difficult.
Was it a chip?
Yeah.
We were listening to a chip. That's what we referred to those lessons on Pine Lake's website, Chip Henderson. We was listening to a chip, and he talked about the difference between when you talk about that, you were saying, I have taken offense. You've not been given offense. You've taken it. You made the decision, I'm going to be offended by that. It's usually a pride issue. Rather than making the decision, I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to be offended. There's still, you can be hurt and not be offended. The offense comes directly in your response to the other person. Right? We're not negating the fact that what was just said, we're human, we have emotions, we have feelings. We're not saying don't have your feelings hurt. Okay? That's hard. You can't always control that. What you control is your response. You can't control them. You can only control you. As far as it depends on you, Paul said, you keep the peace. How about this? James, previously in chapter 1, where we just were, he said, be slow or quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Quick to listen. We don't listen very well. We are supposed to listen to understand, not listen to respond. I know people who listen to respond because their eyes glaze over when I've said something that they're holding on to. They might not interrupt me, But they've held on to that because that's what they're going to respond to, and they missed the rest of it. I may have actually clarified the thing that they were going to respond to me with in the rest of my conversation there. And they missed it because they were holding on to what they were going to respond to. They didn't listen to understand. They listened to respond. There's a big difference.
But there are those people who want to control the conversation so much that you never get an opportunity.
That's true. That's true. There are folks who want to control the conversation, and that's all about control. In fact, in our other class today, we talked about the idea of it's not just, it's pride, but it shows itself, and you want to keep control. And let's boil that down to what that really is. More than you wanting to keep control, what you're really saying is, I'm not going to let you control me. Right? And if that's the case, then don't let them control your response. You can't control them. You can only control you. You want to be a person who demonstrates you live a life that is in fear of the Lord, then you're going to control your tongue and you're going to pursue peace. You're not just going to desire it, you're going to go after it. But check this out. He goes on and he says, verse 15, the eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous and his ears toward their cry. But then he switches the metaphor and he says the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. So God looks upon the righteous and the way they're living their life, but he turns his face to those who are doing evil. What does that mean? It's almost like I can picture God. He's now, you just got to go with the illustration, okay? So I'm picturing God. He's looking out over his creation. He's controlling, or he's sustaining the world as he's put it in motion, and he's letting his spirit be down there to work through the people. He's doing his thing, and suddenly someone does something evil. It's almost like he went, it got his attention. He turned his face to them. He's looking over everything, but he turns his face. When God turns his face to you, it's not always a good thing, right? He's gonna turn his face to those who do evil. To cut off the memory of them from the earth. When he turns his face, it's going to come with consequences, right? He goes on. He says, when the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. See, we're not saying when you have a fear of the Lord and you live your life in that way that you won't have hard times. You will still have hard times. You live in a fallen, cursed world. It's going to happen. Your life isn't going to be all happy and roses and cherries, and sometimes you're going to get the pits out of the cherries, right? And sometimes life's going to be difficult. Sometimes you're going to face trials, and sometimes you're going to face things coming up in your life that you have no control over. But it's interesting that as we talk about things coming up in our lives, that sometimes those things are self-inflicted. Sometimes, as I've heard it said, we do something dumb and then we have to pay a stupid tax. Right? Because we've made the decision. Notice he said he is near the brokenhearted and he saves the crushed in spirit, which infers there are going to be times you are going to be brokenhearted, and there's going to be times you are going to be crushed in spirit, but you're living your life according to the fear of the Lord. What if you're not? What does that look like? Back in Proverbs, finishing up in chapter 1, he starts in verse 22. He says, how long, O simple ones, the naive, the ones who haven't learned yet, O simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing and fools hate knowledge? If you turn at my reproof, behold, I will pour out my spirit to you. I will make my words known to you. Because I have called you, listen to verse 24. Because I have called and you have refused to listen, I have stretched out my hand and no one has heeded, because you have ignored all my counsel and would have none of my reproof. I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when terror strikes you. When terror strikes you like a storm and your calamity comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you, then they will call upon me and I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but will not find me. Because they hated knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord, would have none of my counsel, and despised all my reproof. Therefore they shall eat the fruit of their way, and have their fill of their own devices. God puts godly people in your life to give you advice. God puts the Word of God in your life to give you advice. He offers you His wisdom, and you spurn it. You turn away from it. You decide you're going to do it your way, and God says, so be it. You will receive the fruit of your way. You will have the fill of your own devices. You find yourself in that storm that's mentioned up there in verse 27. You notice what comes when you don't live a life in the fear of the Lord. What comes with the storm and the calamity? Anguish and distress. You feel like you're not being heard when you cry out to God. Perhaps it's because you're not living your life the way He would have you to live your life. That's what Solomon has said. Because you wouldn't do it His way. You have now brought this calamity on yourself. For the simple are killed by their turning away, and the complacency of fools destroys them. Who are the fools? Those who despise wisdom and instruction. But it's interesting. If you live your life according to the fear of the Lord, what comes in verse 33? But whoever listens to me will dwell secure and will be at ease without dread of disaster. Compare that to verse 27. You either have distress and calamity in the middle of a storm, or you're able to be at ease without dread of disaster. Verse 24 of chapter 3 says, if you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. Do not be afraid of sudden terror or of the ruin of the wicked when it comes, for the Lord will be your confidence and will keep your foot from being caught. Sometimes living a life in the fear of the Lord is difficult. After we've seen what that life looks like. It looks like somebody who's willing to make the conscious decision and effort to watch their tongue. It's someone who's willing to not purposefully speak deceit toward others. It's someone who is willing to pursue the peace according to Psalm 34. You look back and compare it and put along with it James chapter 3, and you're saying it's someone who's going to bide their tongue. They're not going to go after their jealous ambitions that is deep within them. It's all for the sake of others. As far as they're concerned, they're going to keep the peace with everyone else. That's a difficult life. That life has sacrifice in our world. That life has times where you don't get ahead because you're not willing to step on people to do so. But what comes with it? Confidence in the Lord and the ability to sleep in peace at night. What's more important to you? Being able to lay your head down and rest in Him during the trials and tribulations of this life that are going to come upon you, knowing that He is for the broken spirit and He will be with those who feel like they've been crushed? Or are you going to live your life against what He has said, so that when you call out to Him, He's going to tell you, I tried to tell you. You had to have it your way. The good news is there's always the ability to return. If we've had a time where we've gone and we've done it against His way, we did it our way, even though we knew that others were telling us and the Word was telling us that we shouldn't do it that way, and we have this calamity come upon us, and we have this distress and anxiousness come upon us, God says you can still return to me. You're getting what your desires have brought you. Now, put those aside, crucify yourself to those, and come live it my way. So next week, we will see that the beginning, the foundation of the fear of the Lord is going to be the wisdom and knowledge we gain. We're going to take a look through the book of Proverbs and other places. We're going to look at the fact that the week after that the fear of the Lord is understandable. It's able to be attained. We're going to look at the fact that the fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. And what does that mean? Does it mean that we tolerate it? Hate and tolerate are not the same. And then we look at the fact that the fear of the Lord is a fountain of life for us. That's how we'll conclude it. So I hope you'll be with us. Don't miss out. These are going to be 4 straight weeks of really good stuff out of Proverbs. So be there with us. If you're watching us on Facebook because you're out of town, they'll be available. If you're watching us on Facebook because you were too lazy to come to church today, we'll see you next week.
Cruel words.
Okay? So, no, that's not cruel words. That's just facts. So, live your life according to the fear of the Lord. And the fear, no, never mind. So, anyway, we will see you all next week. I'm going to close out now. And again, if we have any questions or if you have anything I need to know, send me a private message or put it in the comments, and we'll get back with you. We'll see you next week. Okay.